This is a video that's actually formatted more like a podcast. That is to say, it's something you can play in the background and listen to without needing to actively pay attention to the screen. While I will occasionally make reference to message transcriptions or other visual information put up on the screen, you should find you can get away with checking only a few times throughout. This video is the second in a series of 4 case study videos, as I'm calling them, and these are re-uploads of HFGCS analysis videos that I uploaded to a different YouTube channel in September through November of 2023 inclusive. In re-uploading these videos to the Neat Intel YouTube channel, I'm editing them for clarity and I guess for time effectiveness, so they do differ from the original uploads. I did spend the time editing these because I believe it's going to be easier to follow and more time efficient. If you're new to this channel and are just beginning to get interested in the HFGCS, these analysis videos are not going to be the definitive go-to for all the answers about the HFGCS because I don't necessarily have all the answers, but I believe my comments and insight, for lack of a better word, may be instructive, and many of the questions that I've received over the last few days and weeks are addressed in these videos. The commentary that is included in this video was originally uploaded in October 16th of 2023 and covers HFGCS activity from October 1st through 16th of 2023. This introduction is being recorded in May 1st of 2024, and at this time, and has been the case for an extended period of months, there is a geopolitical crisis in Israel and Palestine that is ongoing. This actually started on October 7th of 2023, which is covered in the period of time during which the analysis video originally discusses. If you're new to the channel, I would recommend listening to this video because it will answer something that I often see discussed or asked about. In specific, people wonder, do these EAMs have to do with ongoing geopolitical events? So, for example, on a day when EAMs are slow in April of 2024, I've seen people comment, well, it's going to pick up when things in Israel kick off again. I believe such a conclusion is spurious and almost certainly incorrect. And I think if you listen to this video and look at messages that were broadcast around the start, you will understand why I feel that way. Simply put, it seems really unlikely that your typical HFGCS message is going to have anything to do with events going on overseas. Or, at the very least, it's unrealistic to assume that they will be minute-by-minute reactions to things going on elsewhere in the world. I think if you listen to this video, which covers the conspicuous period during which this current event in Israel started, you will come to understand why I feel that way. You may also come to the conclusion of the exact opposite. I'm not going to tell people what to think, but I am going to share my thoughts and explain why I feel that way. Now, I would challenge anyone who watches this video or ever listens to the HFGCS and feels that these messages do certainly have something to do with events going on overseas to put together a compelling and consistent case that makes that argument. In other videos on this channel, during live streams, and certainly something I will talk about again and again in the future, I have every incentive to tell an audience that yes, these messages have something to do with things going on overseas. However, that's not what this project is or its objective or what it's going to be about at any point. I don't feel it's true, and for those less familiar with this topic, this case study series will give you some insight on why I don't feel it's true. Having said that, I spent a lot of time editing this video for conciseness and time efficiency, so the longer this introduction goes on, the less time efficient it is. So, after the jump, you will now hear a time edited for clarity and blah 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 of a video originally put out in October 16th of 2023. I hope that you find it informative. Today's episode was recorded October 16th, 2023, and I'm going to cover the period of time from October 1st through 16th inclusive. And before I start that, I will note the last episode like this only covered up to September 22nd. I'm not skipping September 23rd through 30th because nothing happened. Certainly things happened. We had more Skymaster messages September 27th and 28th, and we also had a day with over 40 messages. That was on actually September 28th as well. So certainly it was busy. It's just I waited a little bit too long to make another one of these videos. I'm covering 16 days as it is. This video is October 1st through 16th, and the main thing that is going to come up for this block of time and ongoing is folks want to know whether the incident in Israel and Palestine, which began on October 7th and is still going on, whether we're seeing that conveyed in EAM traffic or not. You guys probably know my answer is going to be, I think probably not, and we wouldn't be able to tell anyways, but I'm going to give you guys, the what I've always done. I'm going to give you the EAMs and give you a little bit of my input and guidance and the things I've noticed. But ultimately, if you want to conclude things, I'll skim through October 1st through 6th just to get to what you guys probably want to know more about. But before I get there, I do want to stop and note a few things. Okay, Sunday, October 1st. So it's very light, just 3 messages. And that means some of the main things I want to know before we got to October 6th. I can note that here because the lack of message traffic means I can make the points very cleanly and without too much confusion. You guys kind of like looking and being overwhelmed by all the letters and numbers on the screens. So point 1, the 2103 message for Betel 01. This is something I've talked about briefly in the past, but sometimes the call signs of the EAMs are indicated as being 4. You can pretty readily find that corresponding to a plane, and certainly when it is a structured message like an EAM or an FDM, you're going to find that the indicator recipient is, as far as I know, if you can find it, always going to be E6, and that's certainly the case here. If you looked up Betel 01, whether you were looking at this on ADSB Exchange, Flight Radar 24, I think airframes.io is working. It never works for me, but that's certainly an option. Lots of resources. You can find this. I've, in the past, tried away from talking about this because I'm not a plane guy. There have been channels I've talked to in the past. There have been people I've talked to in the past. There are people who know more about these planes. You give them a model number, they're going to tell you what that plane is, who built it, what its capabilities are, typical flight paths, all this stuff that I do not know. And every time I've tried to comment on planes, I usually make some stupid comment like offhand, like I'm one of those people who's like, oh my God, there's like 46s in the sky. That's crazy. It's like, mate, that happens like hundreds of times a year. It's nothing crazy. Like, it's not a cause for panic. And then I quickly learned, okay, like be quiet, like just monitor and learn something. And I've got to be honest, like it's the plane stuff for whatever reason, I'm not too interested in. So I'm not interested in monitoring it all the time. However, this kind of like basic line up the EAM call sign with the plane, certainly when it matches, I'm happy to do that. And I've started doing that. And it's not going to show up in the title cards, but like on the back end in my own spreadsheets, I'm starting to match up. When a call sign goes out, was there a matching plane? So in this case, and people get mad at me for pronouncing acronyms sometimes, but the ICAO, the ICAO, the code, whatever it is, it was Betel 01 was an E6, Alpha Echo 0416. Point 1 was just planes, I guess. Point 2, the colors. So you guys have been seeing the yellow show up in these title cards for a while. If I have 2 of the same character in a row, Alpha, Alpha, Echo, Echo, whatever it is, I highlight that yellow. And there's general trends in where duplicate characters will show up. It's a little difficult to ascertain an absolute format thing from that, but there are general patterns there. What is newer, and I started doing it this month, the cyan, aquamarine, whatever color you want to call that, that's new. So that's going to be, I'm not sure the terminology here because I just said like alpha alpha is a repeat. So, like in this case, the 1632 message, Zulu Quebec, shows up in the message twice. So I highlight that. That's great. That's fine. And, just like with the repeating characters, I'm going to guess a decent proportion, if not possibly even the majority of the time I highlight this, it's going to be a false positive. And one thing I would love to do is kind of increase the criteria to like, well, if it's like 3 characters that show up in a message twice, then I'll highlight that just to reduce the risk of like highlighting false positives. But we'll see with some later messages, there do seem to be some trends where the repeats are just 2 and it is like a deliberate thing. So that's tough. I can't do that. I can do it, but then I'm losing information. So you have to take the false positives as they are. And I have no way of knowing when something is a false positive or no. I do have certain things that will indicate to me when I know when I have a true positive. I don't know when I have a false positive, if that makes sense. And I said I would skim through these and get to October 7th quickly, but actually I have a third point I want to make here. And it's, I guess, just broadly, why am I doing this color coding at all? Is it because I'm trying to decode them? Not necessarily. You guys have probably heard me recently, especially with like the longer messages, like the 142s, the 246 character messages. I'm just trying to get an idea of like the format, maybe the better word to be structure of these messages. However, this has been coming up not on Twitter, but some other social networking sites where I, talk about this. I don't rule out the possibility that these messages could be decoded. Certainly in theory, I believe, maybe I'm a little bit optimistic, but I think in theory it is entirely possible these messages could be decoded, and identifying message structure could help along those ends, though I must say I'm kind of interested in the structure for their own sake. But because some people continue to get tripped up on this point, and it is a pedantic point, I'll concede that fully, but I've made like an infographic that kind of explains why I think it is possible these messages could be decrypted. So I've made an infographic. I'll put it up on screen. If you guys are ever confused by a point I'm making about, whether messages could be decoded or decrypted, it's very much for the basis of what I'm saying here. Am I saying I can do it? No, but I am saying that, saying something cannot be done when it possibly could be done with enough compute power and time is very, these are two different things. So nearly impossible right now, yeah, it's probably nearly impossible. In 5-10 years, there's a lot of news coming out now about quantum computers. My guess is within my lifetime or yours, we will probably see someone with the capability to decode an EAM, and I'm going to humor myself and say some of the annotation I do on this channel may help with decrypting it. Is that like an OPSEC failure? Am I compromising the security of the United States of America? No, because I still think it will take a lot of compute power and a lot of time, like real world time, not just computer time. Like it could take like months to decode these messages, by which point they should already be rotating their keys and stuff. But I'm not going to read through it. It's up on screen. Pause if you'd like to read it. Monday, October 2nd. So this came up in the previous podcast episode, whatever we're calling these, where sometimes, the messages are broadcast, but they seem to cut off mid-transmission. And you can talk about, or you can speculate about whether that's due to like an operator experience or an equipment failure or whatever it is. And sometimes it's not obvious. But today is interesting because we usually get to find out, or we can cross-reference to find out what the full message was despite the mistake. So, for the 2025 message, you can look at 2022 to find out what the full message was. For 23-24, they ended up broadcasting the full thing at 23-27. But for the 22-25 that got cut off, we apparently never find out what the full message was. So it's a bit odd. And, I like to think sometimes I'm listening to these messages just to look for failures, because that can help kind of diagnose some theories. But in this case, that doesn't actually help us triage whether these are happening due to equipment failures or operator inexperience. But still, we note it. It's interesting. And yeah, Tuesday, October 3rd, 20 messages. That puts us a little bit above average. I think the average right now, kind of running for the last few months, typically 15 or 16 messages a day in total. And, on a lot of these busier days, it's made up of repeats and stuff. So actually, we're only 12 unique messages today. And of these, I do want to call out the last message in particular. If you look at the repeating character sets that I've highlighted in cyan, aquamarine, whatever, Papa Tango Hotel, you've got that at positions 18, 19, 20. And again, at positions 23, 24, 25, we're going to see a similar pattern on October 5th, which first I have to talk about Wednesday, October 4th, but just 3 messages, all 3 unique, whatever, nothing crazy. So let's skip ahead to Thursday, October 5th. Overall, 13 messages, 9 of them are unique, but take a look at the 1546 message. It got repeated twice at 1629 and 1700, but you're going to notice that it has repeating character sets. Victor Charlie Kilo at positions 18, 19, 20, and again at positions 23, 24, 25, and that matches up with the repeating character positions that I just talked about on October 3rd for the last message. And you can note that those both began with the Echo Golf prefix. Another thing, though, is if you take today's message just on its own and compare it to other messages that have been broadcast that were 55 characters long, and this is something I tweeted about, and a user by the name of Blumpkin_ expanded a little bit more, but I'll put this up on screen. If we look at all the 55 character messages I've personally transcribed, regardless of prefix, we have these kind of similar patterns across all of them. And that seems to suggest that we kind of have an idea of the general format of 55 character messages. And again, I didn't figure this out all myself. I kind of had the initial thing and someone else added on to it. And that's kind of one of the things I like to do here is hopefully people like Blumpkin, maybe you, the person watching this, can help. I don't notice everything. Sometimes I try and do this with script. Sometimes I try and do this just by looking at it. And all it can take is another person taking a look and they will notice things that I don't. So that is super neat. So yeah, from that, we get the general format of 55 character messages, and on top of that neatness, we go ahead to Friday, October 6th. Again, like Wednesday, we only had 3 messages. Nothing crazy to talk about here. And now we get to the day that I would assume most people who are watching / listening to this are interested in, which is Saturday, October 7th, and all the subsequent days we'll talk about here. And you guys want to know, like, is the Israel-Palestine thing affecting HFGCS traffic? So let's take a look at Saturday. 7 messages, 3 unique. That's, it's nothing crazy. Maybe as a direct reaction to that, but I'll be honest, this is something I've kind of been speculating myself on for a while, even prior to this. What if traffic goes down due to like geopolitical events? It's not a bad guess, but like, how do you go about proving that? So for example, October 7th, October 8th, first 2 days of this conflict, only 10 messages. That is, at least as of late, pretty low for a weekend. So you might take a look at that and say, that supports the theory. We had it backwards. We were looking for a lot of traffic, but it turns out there's actually less traffic. That indicates, they're too busy for messages, which sure, let's run with that for a moment. But then, how do you tell the difference between there's no messages because they're too busy or there's no messages because they're just not doing anything? You have to take a look at September 30th and October 1st, the weekend right before. It only had 3 messages the entire weekend. In fact, there were none on September 30th, which since I resumed monitoring back in June, that was the first day since then that there was a day with 0 messages. So did like something happen that day? I haven't seen anyone talk about any major event happening that weekend. In fact, I was kind of like mumbling stuff, maybe because it's the start of a new financial quarter, new financial year actually for the U.S. Department of Defense, if not just the entire U.S. government. I don't know. But you kind of get my point. I was kind of allowed to wax philosophical about complete balderdash. I knew we were really pushed up against, but now I'm kind of saying, well, another slow weekend, and folks are like, oh, that's because they're too busy because they're all analyzing the conflict. That's fair. I don't mean to like completely diminish or belittle what you're saying, but like, I just feel like if you're gonna throw a theory like that out there, you can't be cherry picking. You have to at least concede, this is my theory or this is my guess, this is why I believe it. But then it's kind of like, well, how do you propose that? I'm trying to think of a good analogy, but almost think of like literal traffic, like car traffic outside. Why is there no, let's say, you look outside your window and a normally pretty busy road, quiet, you've only seen like 1 or 2 cars all day. What's going on? Like, is there a gas crisis and nobody can afford to fill up their cars, major event? Or maybe it's just like a holiday, or maybe just people weren't planning on doing much today. The weather is kind of iffy, so they kind of canceled their plans, whatever it is. And again, with literal traffic, how do you tell the difference? Well, you've got to look at something else. Just looking at the EAMs, you can't really tell. And then when you try and line it up to real world events, I don't know. You don't have all the data. And when I say this, I kind of wonder out loud, like, am I going to lose like the interest of people? Like, who on earth goes on YouTube and kind of says, I have no idea how to tell any of the stuff that I monitor for almost 2 years now? I don't know. Anyways, so for the rest of this podcast thingy, obviously all the other time cards we're going to look at is going to have this Israel-Palestine thing looming over them. And as you listen to this, you can decide for yourself whether things are lining up or not. I will say for myself, the one thing possibly in support feels like messages are becoming more complex. It feels like there's a general rising slope in message frequency, but that's something that's been going on for the last few months, I think. I feel if you compare message traffic right now, quantity, format, length, whatever, both quantity and quality, if you compare it to last year, it feels different. It does feel, in some sense, more complex. I will concede that much. I can't give a material example. It's just a feeling I have. I probably could back it up, but if I do that, then it takes away from other thing, blah, blah, blah. Let's just move ahead here. So since I already did October 8th, we can go to Monday, October 9th, 22 messages, actually a lot of repeats there. So only 9 of them were unique. Nothing crazy. Tuesday, October 10th, 19 messages, 6 unique. So we had a 142 character message in the mix. And these are messages that I've uploaded before to this channel, if not the other channel. Pretty sure this YouTube channel. I'll talk about that at the end of the video for anyone who doesn't know why I'm talking about two different channels. But I've talked about these before, whether it was on Twitter or on YouTube. You guys have heard, 142 characters, just like the 246s, they have this general format where they have these repeating characters that split the message up. Then you have like these substrings in the middle. There's a long 41 character at the start, and then a 9 or an 18 or whatever at the end, usually divisible by 9, not always, blah, blah, blah. So neat, but nothing we've not seen before. Wednesday, October 11th gets a little bit more interesting. We have 20 messages, 17 of them are unique. A new prefix was introduced, Yankee India, used for the 1831 and 1906 messages. And here again, you can look at some repeating character sets, 22, 23, 24, and 27, 28, 29, highlighted in cyan for you for both of them. I'll talk about that on October 16th because we'll see some more Yankee India messages that line up with that. And here, just for the sake of it, we have messages, we have direct EAMs actually for call signs Arius and Morley. These don't have call sign numbers. No one has matched them up to any E6, so we don't know who the addressees are. And this is something I'm going to start to talk about more. I've seen this before, I just haven't talked about it. So I'd like to hear people's guesses. I like to see people start to try and line those message time up. Did you see planes take off around that time? Did the Navy do something around that time? This or that. And since we have so little information, since this is murky, I will take your wildest, most out there theories, the stuff I usually reject. Because I have no leads right now. Who are Arius and Morley? In a couple days, we'll see a lot more call signs like this. There's no numbers. No one's matched it up to anything. You currently have free reign. Okay, so Thursday, October 12th, we had 12 messages on this day, and 7 of them were unique. And this is another one of the things where now that I'm going to start talking about the planes a little bit, I would like to call attention to this. And this is a format. This is a general structure we've seen before. I just resisted it for a while because I felt it was circumstantial evidence, but this has been the general thing that keeps happening. So at 2114, you heard a message from Hibernate, and it was a message for prong 67. And this is a call sign. You were able to look this up on a flight radar. I think within half an hour, it showed up for those curious. I'm getting the call sign right now because it's not in the script, or sorry, the code. It was an E6 and the hex code ICAO, ICAO, whatever, Alpha Echo 0412. So that is who prong 67 was. We know that for sure. And then what I kind of contested, and this is still circumstantial, but only so much because I'll talk about this. But at 2114, there's a message for prong 67. And then at 2142, you see a different message, which is broadcast, not for anyone in particular. But then at 2210, and then every half hour after that, there was a weaker signal coming from, we presume, a plane over the continental United States, because you could barely hear this signal in Europe. I couldn't pick it up at all in Japan. It is repeating the 2142 message. So this has happened fairly often in the past, like enough to be called kind of a semi-recurring, like regular, whatever the correct term is there. This happens a lot. A message will be broadcast. It's for a certain call sign with numbers in it. Then a second message will be broadcast for apparently no one in particular. And then after that second message is broadcast, you will hear a different call sign where signal and some other, things line up to suggest this is coming from a plane located somewhere over continental US, or, the immediate US, whatever you call, like the water, ocean, legal territory boundary. We'll start to repeat that message over and over and over, about 4 times, sometimes more, sometimes less. That's iffier, but every half hour. Now, at this point, this is new for me. I'm saying this definitely lines up. With confidence, with conviction rather, I can say with a high degree of conviction that I believe the 2114 message is indicated for prong 67 to say, hey, I'm going to broadcast a message soon, and it's going to be your job to broadcast this to a submarine. And then at 2142, it broadcasts a message. And then starting at 2210, using call sign Callaway, prong 67 broadcasts that message over and over to a submarine. Friday, October 13th, very spooky, 35 messages, 24 of them are unique. It is actually a good example here because Wahoo 73, that message for them corresponded to another E6, the ICAO, Alpha Echo 041 Alpha, if anyone wants to look that up. They are probably, with a high degree of conviction, going to be the source of the manifold repeat messages. Now, what I want to talk about here, briefly, I'm not going to expound, the way I just did for some of the last few days. November Kilo prefix, new prefix. For Friday and again on Saturday, you see it used exclusively for messages for call signs with no numbers. And again, I have no leads on who these planes are. So they may not be planes. They could be, I don't know, aircraft carriers. They could be secret agents overseas. They could be pizza orders. I don't know. But box office turmoil, torchbearer, unless we don't know who these guys are. We don't know what they are, whatever. And they had a monopoly on the November Kilo prefix, which extends actually for Torchbearer Turmoil and Unless to Saturday, October 14th. Another busy-ish day, 17 messages, 15 unique. The November Kilo message prefix continues to be exclusive for those guys. And that some people reach out to me and say, oh, they've never heard the same call signs get used across 2 days. It's a little bit iffy, but I will say this has happened before. The most recent example would be that there were messages for call sign Sky High on both August 19th and August 20th of this year. So call signs enduring past that, what we normally say, all the call signs get rotated and changed at the start of a new day. This seems like a deliberate preservation of call sign, call word, whatever the correct terminology is there. And this is where I'll be honest with you, I start to wonder, is this maybe something to do with Israel-Palestine? Like, are these aircraft carriers? Are these, something like that? And, and then to support my guess, I would say, well, then what was Sky High back in August? Was there an operation that you can point to on, August 19th and 20th where there would have been a need to preserve a call sign for something across 2 days? The same way we see call signs preserved here. Is it a military operation? The military is always doing something, almost always doing something. So it's tricky, but these are the things I put out there. I'm like, maybe someone will pick this up and do something with it. If you're just going to say, oh, obviously they were used as a call sign across 2 days, that means it definitely has to do with the conflict in the Middle East. I'd like to see a bit more. Sunday, October 15th. This was a very busy day. I was actually getting annoyed during this day because, as you can see, I had to split the info across 3 different cards. It's a pain in Adobe, it's a pain in Premiere, Photoshop, whatever suite, that I definitely pay the annual license for because I love Adobe. I love the Creative Suite. 39 messages, 21 of them are unique. The Mike November prefix returns from October 10th. I can't remember if I talked about that on October 10th. I don't believe I did. There you go. And this was the 3rd day in a row of the November Kilo messages. And here we have some more call signs. We don't know who they are. They don't know what they are, blah, blah, blah. These were Shalala, which they pronounce 3 different ways, so I may have that wrong. Shillelagh, I don't know. I usually just try and type things into Bing or Google or whatever, search engine I prefer, and just be like, which one has the most positive hits? So Shalala, whatever that is, had the most results, so I picked that. That's honestly the logic, as long as it sounds plausible. And that is a word where just the way it's spelled, I can see operators looking at that and pronouncing it, several different ways. Retail price, Rolling Stone. And the other thing I found interesting here was the November Kilo message prefix was used for a message for Blonde 85, which I found interesting. But Blonde 85, even though I had a call sign with a number in it, I wasn't able to find a plane with that call sign. A few people suggested it may be Blown 85, which landed like 6 or 7 hours before that message went out. So maybe it could be that, but personally, I don't believe so. You're free to believe that it was because I don't have evidence either way, but that's just something that, make a note of it, see what happens if that becomes like a recurring thing. And you can look through past entries and time cards I've made. It's just something I'm trying to note now, as I said, earlier in this video. October 16th, that is the day I'm recording this video. So this is off script again. I'm looking at this live. We had the November Kilo prefix for, is that now the 4th day in a row? And we also had the Yankee India prefix return, which I talked about its debut on October 11th. And I said I would talk about it, closer to the end of the video, which is we are now closer to the end of the video by definition than we were earlier. So Yankee India, first thing, the 1620, actually, let me just put up the image I made today. So I really like this, and I also really hate it because this is messy. So these are all the Yankee India prefix messages I heard on both the 11th and 16th. So the ones on the 11th, I have these nicely boxed for you. You can see obvious repetitions there that match up with each other. The 2 on the 11th, and then the 16th, we have another 32 character message that matches up very nicely, repetitions in the exact same spot. And then you have the 1632 59 character message that starts to get messy. So it's it's not at the same position, but you see Tango, X-ray, Zulu, Yankee, and they're almost overlapping with each other. But Tango, X-ray, Zulu happens later in the message, and so does X-ray, Zulu, Yankee, but they're not overlapping with each other that time, if you understand what I'm trying to say. Another thing, you also see repetition of 4-6, which could be a false positive, but skipping ahead just to the 1751, because there's another 59 character message, and I would love to do some highlighting or something here to make it easier for you guys to follow, but it's a pain. So the 4-6 is not a false positive because you can see the 1751 message, you have Echo India repeating in the exact same positions. However, that one does seem to have some false positives. You can see Alpha Zulu repeats in 2 things, but it doesn't line up with the previous message. It also has 6 Echo repeating, and that again doesn't seem to be lining up. But in terms of like overlapping thing and repetitions, Zulu, Lima, Yankee repeats in the same position as the other, and then, you know, the other thing, Lima, Yankee, Hotel is repeating the same thing. This is getting very messy, and it honestly starts to look like, you know, one of those like schizophrenic, I apologize, like one of those, you know, conspiratorial conspiracy walls, you know, the cork board with all the lines and the strings, and it looks insane, but there is obviously something here because it's kind of repeating in the same positions. Even like the 2 character, which I assume was a false positive, you can see the repetitions in the same thing. So there's obviously something to this. And just because I skipped the 1726, but you know, you can kind of see the same thing happening. Uniform, X-ray, Hotel is repeating, as is X-ray, Hotel, Sierra. Actually, in this case, it is like a 4 character thing that's repeating in the same way. And then the Sierra 4 may be a false positive. I guess instead of me like talking through this, I would just say, look at the image, decide for yourself if you think of this as significant or just, you know, signal from noise. But I, for one, think this is clearly something. Does it mean I can decode the messages? No, I probably do not have the computer capacity. I mean, I know I don't have the computer capacity. Like, I don't have the compute time or power to attempt to decrypt these messages, and I'm not a cryptographer. I've never taken a cryptography class, tried reading a textbook, and there are so many references to that stupid webcomic XKCD. I got angry and stopped reading the textbook. So I'm not going to be the guy to do it. However, if there were someone to do it, you know, this is where you start, man. Like, this is where you would start building from, I assume. Yeah, so that, you know, does this regard Israel, Palestine? I don't know, guys, up to you. It could. These all take place after the start of the incursion, the event, war, whatever, you know, the correct word is there. October 7th, pardon me, to the present and ongoing. But at the same time, it's not like the thing in Ukraine ended, but that's a whole other thing. I was about to start commenting on attention spans and whatnot, but you understand what I'm trying to say, I'm sure.